The new Canadian Jurassic Park was on everyone's mind, and the newspapers could not stop talking and speculating about what the next dinosaurs would be. For the Mosasaurus couple that the park recently had added, a lot of viewers had come up with great names for the male and female. Once again, thank you so much for all the great suggestions, and it's great to see all that support. For the male Mosasaurus, we at the park went with the name Mosey, as suggested by viewer Yoshi Dinosaur and Harry Builder. It was a cute name for a monster that big, and the female would be called Pearl, as suggested by viewer Jocintosh. Pearl was a bit more calm than Mosey, so this fitted better with her personality. Be sure to stick around again today to see which dinosaurs you can name this time. With the park coming along very nicely, and the people enjoying the first real 5-star attraction with the Mosasaurus couple, it was time to shift gears and add another very beloved dinosaur. The Velociraptors had of course already been showcased in the earlier zoo and safari park, but with the promised new behavior patterns and personalities that could be added, the audience was promised to see the raptors like never before. A very large pack was flown over. 9 individual raptors would be added to the park, which was way more than the previous zoo and safari park. With such a large pack, some of the scientists were nervous if they could be contained. Again, these dinosaurs did not have the prohibitors implemented yet, and thus could still show aggressive signs of instincts. But with 9 raptors, of course, they needed to be named. And yes, 9 names are a lot, but that gave the park the chance to pick out a lot of viewers for their recommendations. So once again, please help us here at the park to come up with the names of these 9 raptors. Now you don't have to come up with the names for all 9 of them, but just with how many you like. And for the creatives out there who do want to come up with 9 names in the comments, feel free to do so as well. We look forward to reading your suggestions. Now all the raptors are female, but we won't be that picky when it comes to names. We have 6 red ones and 3 tan ones. The raptors were absolutely beautiful specimens and looked as ferocious as ever. There was immediately a strict hierarchy established, yet what was remarkable was that it did not take long for smaller groups to be created, almost like groups of kids on a playground or groups of convicts in a jail. Seemed like despite being part of the same pack, there was still some company within that pack that the raptors preferred. The raptors were eventually transported to their new home, and seeing as how many raptors there would be, enough feeders needed to be provided. 1 goat feeder would not cut it, and so multiple were added. Despite the raptors being friendly enough to one another, it did surprise the scientists to see some duels between the red and tan raptors. Their color pattern should not really matter that much, and they had no other tinkering done to them besides just the color and shape of the patterns. It was very much established though that the red raptors were the ones in charge, but it was not the same kind of hierarchy as with the raptors back in the first zoo. There, the hierarchy was so strict to the point where the alpha would decide the order on which the raptors could feed. But here, it seemed that everyone had a bit of a loose leash when it came to that. Now the park was already planning to add the next dinosaur, but also came up with a great idea to showcase the audience some of the raptors' new behavior. But that would come in due time, as the next giant creature that was going to be added was the Ankylosaurus. The Ankylosaurus was literally built like a tank, as quoted by some, but here at the park we prefer to see it as the hedgehog of the dinosaurs. Its spiky shell was almost impossible to penetrate with the teeth and jaws of predators, and though in many portraits or other works of art the Ankylosaurus is often portrayed as fighting off hunters with its tail, it would also sometimes curl up a bit, to where only its shell was visible. It would stick to the ground like glue, to where predators could not hurt it. The head was still vulnerable, but that too had some larger spikes defending against big bites. Since it was built so heavy, it really could not outrun any incoming predators, and thus had to rely on these types of strategies. 3 were brought over to the park in total, and they always seemed a bit cranky. But despite seeming grumpy like that, they actually felt quite comfortable and were compatible with a lot more different dinosaurs than first imagined. Often it was believed that they preferred to live in isolation, but it felt safe in some herds or with other ankylosaurs as long as there weren't too many. In a herd that was too big, it probably could not establish well if the noise of the other creatures was panic or simply playfulness, since there would be an abundance of noise all the time. With a group that was medium-sized or even small, it could heed the call that danger was incoming and act accordingly to that. When a battle between an ankylosaurus and another bigger dinosaur like a T-Rex or Spinosaurus would occur, the battle also often would not end in a killed predator if the ankylosaurus won, unlike with something like a Triceratops. The most common result was that the tail whip of an ankylo resulted in a broken leg for the carnivore, and it most likely would succumb then to its wounds later on, or be picked off by another healthy carnivore. If the wound was severe enough to where the T-Rex could not move, it could even be attacked and devoured by raptors. Which brought the park to the next big announcement. Since the raptors had shown some new behaviors due to some breakthroughs that the scientists applied, some believed that they were now able to properly hunt as a pack. They could take down a larger creature by coordinating an attack together. To test this out and showcase it to the public, 4 Edmontosaurus were brought over to function as food for the raptors. Though many were very enthusiastic about this idea and could not wait to see the raptors work together, there was also some talk of people criticizing the park, as this was animal cruelty. With the goats, the kills were at least somewhat quick, and the animal did not have to suffer much. But the raptors were small, meaning that larger prey would take time to take down and undergo a painful and slow process. Then again, the other side counter-argued that this was simply Mother Nature going its way, and that this is how it always was. When the Edmontosaurus were set in the raptor enclosure, there was a distinct panic among them. They could feel that the others inside the enclosure were hostile and that something was up. The Edmontosaurus were also chosen since they did not have any particular defense mechanisms like spikes or teeth with which they could wound the raptors. For the raptors were the star attraction here. It actually took quite a while before the raptors showed any interest, much to the dismay of the early audience hoping to get a glimpse of the hunting. Maybe the velociraptors themselves were also a bit startled to see these large intruders being dropped inside their new home. But then eventually the audience got what they came for, and the hunt was on. The first of the unlucky Edmontosaurus had been chosen as a target, and multiple raptors jumped on its back and lunged at its throat and head. Despite the Edmontosaurus not having a specific defensive mechanism, it still hurled around and tried to wound the raptors by crushing or trampling them. And a few were indeed thrown around like rag dolls, but not to the point where they suffered grave wounds. Eventually the Edmontosaurus fell, and the raptors started eating. This also was what the park wanted. They wanted the Edmontosaurus to function as a food basis, and not merely as a bloody attraction. But then something unexpected happened, and the raptors started attacking the other Edmontosaurus as well without eating the entire carcass of the first one. There was no way the raptors were hungry again, and thus, this killing was merely done for sport. This was exactly what the ones who opposed this idea talked about, that the hunting and butchering of the dinosaurs by the raptors was purely done for entertainment, and was a cruel display. And indeed, the raptors did not stop with those two. Even the last Edmontosaurus was immediately attacked afterward, who did not show a whole lot of restraint or resistance. It had probably already come to terms and accepted that it would be next on the raptors' list. Word that this display and the event had been traveling the globe for quite a while, and a few activists had disguised themselves as park technicians, and through sabotage, they wanted to throw a halt to these bloody hunts. They had weaseled their way into the control room, and had lowered the voltage of the electric fences to the point where the raptors could now break out. See, in their mind, the park then had to take action and sedate the raptors and put a stop to the Edmontosaurus feeding. Yeah, it wasn't a very clever plan, since obviously the result would be that the raptors break out, but humans have proven to do stupid things all the time, like eating Tide Pods or driving blindfolded on public roads for stupid challenges. And so the raptors did indeed break out, and as if karma would have it, the first of the victims were the activists that were responsible for the breakout. In a way, they had succeeded in stopping any further hunt on the other dinosaurs, but instead, they had now become the prey for the raptors. Panic soon erupted, and people started fleeing everywhere. The raptors hunted down the park's poor audience members, though a few were also a bit scared and apprehensive of going outside in the big, scary, wide world. The audience were being advised to evacuate to nearby shelters or buildings, but there were hundreds of people still outside. These were picked off, one by one, and even a few unlucky ones ran into the open enclosure in all their panic and found themselves cornered within the raptor cage. All the rangers in the park scrambled to take down the raptors, or at least distract them, and eventually, the raptors were put to sleep and brought to a secluded space. It had been quite a while since something in one of these parks escalated this much, and it was a wake-up call to many visitors. But the fact that this was done by sabotage meant that the park was safe, and instead had to up their security measures to make sure that this would not happen again.